first forest fire in the history of New Mexico sweeps unchecked through thousands of acres of valuable woodland in Gila National Forest. A state of emergency has been declared, and men and equipment are rushed into the stricken area. U.S. Forest Service planes fly through billowing smoke clouds to pinpoint supplies for firefighters along a 70-mile front. So critical is the situation, troops from Fort Bliss, Texas are rushed into the breach. 30,000 acres of timberland are seared in the 6 days before the fire is brought under control. Many deer and other wild game perished. A terrible price to pay for carelessness. A terrible toll of our national resources.
Lightning does make me nervous. Oh, yeah. I've had some close calls. My name is Aaron Jones. My current position is Fire Management Officer for the Wilderness Ranger District, which is part of the Gila National Forest. That's back when I was out as a firefighter. I don't get out on the line, digging line very much anymore. When I first started, there was a lot of, it was suppressing most fires. We really didn't allow fire to play its role on the landscape until we got into the rainy season. So even if they were lightning starts, we were putting out a lot of fires.
If you just look at the ecosystem right here, it'll really speak to you. If you know what you're looking at, all the trees are about the same height. There's not a lot of spacing in here. This area hasn't seen a lot of fire. My name is Henry Provencio. I'm the district ranger for the Wilderness Ranger District on the Gila National Forest. Over the past, well, it's probably 100 years, we have gone in there and suppressed fire for many different reasons.
We're having another very active fire season. We're going to have to probably deal with this down here for another 4 to 6 weeks at least before hopefully we'll get some of the summer rains. The monsoonal flow will start to come up. Once again, approaching record dryness, and we get the hot, dry winds. And when we get those combinations, we get a fire like we have with the Whitewater Baldy, that even though our folks went in there and tried to suppress that right from the start, but because of the field conditions, the weather they were faced with, and the difficulty of that terrain, you know, they made the right choice and had to be able to pull out and be able to get to some ground that they could safely work.
Now what we're finding is all that suppression over the decades has really increased the fuel loading. We haven't allowed fire to play its natural role. And I think that combined with seeing the climate changes, seeing these changes in weather patterns, has created almost a perfect storm of buildup of fuels, dry conditions, long-term droughts, that when we do have a fire, they get much bigger than what we would have seen maybe in the past. You know, here in the Southwest, a 10 to 20,000 acre fire would be considered very large. That would be a large fire. And now it almost seems like 10, 20,000 acre fires are somewhat routine. It's not like we've never had big fires, but I think we're seeing a big increase in the frequency of the large fires and a regular occurrence of these, you know, very large fires.
The dispatch center is basically the southwest corner of New Mexico. The Gila National Forest is 3.3 million acres, but I would say that the state is probably twice as big as that, and BLM's twice as big as that. So
it's a big area.
A lot going on this map. The blinking lights are either active fires or smoke checks, right? So you could see from yesterday's lightning, we got fairly active. You know, we had a week and a half of drying. You know, it wasn't as wet. The monsoon wasn't as robust as what it had been. So things sort of had time to dry out, and then we got all that lightning yesterday, and we picked up a whole bunch of new fires.
Signal Peak, Silver City Dispatch. I have a smoke report when you're ready to copy. Go ahead with the smoke report.
So he's seeing a fire. Probably started from that cell. Buggy on Baldy, Division 6-5 on Black Mountain.
Division 6-5, Black Mountain.
Hey, Gene, I don't know if you have visibility in there to the cliff dwellings. It looks like it's getting some rain. Can you tell?
Okay, firm. It is getting some rain. It's not heavy season right now. It's right on the very edge of the zone. It's getting a little bit.
Okay, I copy. Appreciate it. So basically, you can kind of almost see a real light spot out there. That's kind of the area that that fire was called in. What a good rain. Silver City Dispatch Division 6-5 on Black Mountain.
Division 6-5, Silver City Dispatch on Signal Peak.
Hey, Dennis, up here at Copperas, getting heavy precip. The cliff dwellings area is getting light precip, no visibility into that area. So I'll be headed back to station. We'll have somebody come up tomorrow and see if they can see that little smoke.
Good copy, Aaron. Sounds like it's receiving some moisture.
All right, thanks, Dennis. If there's a fire, it ain't going nowhere.
Earlier this year, May 13th, we got a call that there was a fire. Is this a campfire that somebody's seeing because we were in fire restrictions, or is this a wildfire?
We were under a really extremely dry period with low RHs. We've got a lot of grass in that area from last year's monsoons. The lookout at Black Mountain, which was roughly 10 miles to the north of the fire, could see a glow down in the canyon. So that let us know that we needed to get some resources out there as soon as possible. They're observing trees torching, isolated torching, and active movement in the grass.
Big indicator that, oh, we're gonna see some serious fire behavior out of this, because that was happening at night when there's no solar radiation, when the temperatures are the coolest, and when you have the highest relative humidities.
Very unusual for this time of year.
By that morning, we were all at work by 6 a.m. The crews had been on the fire all night. It had started in the Gila Wilderness, and it was burning towards the Aldo Leopold Wilderness. There was a what we call a cherry stem section that was not wilderness, and a main thoroughfare. It's our North Star Road, goes right through the middle of that.
What they're doing on these big fires, because you can't go direct, is they're trying to find areas that they can stop progression of the fire. Roads are a good feature to use, but they're not always in perfect alignment or in the right spots. And so you might connect them with trails, with hand lines, with dozer lines. And what they're doing with these is just trying to find ways to cut off this northern part of the fire. Once it crossed Forest Road 150, there's no other barriers to try and stop the spread of the fire. It's getting into remote, rugged areas, remote terrain that had heavy fuel loadings. Everything was in alignment with the wind, the fuels, the canyons were all in alignment. And there's just nowhere that you can go try and establish a line.
At that point, we wanted to keep the fire from going west and keep it from going south. And so that was where our primary focus was. We had already assembled the next level incident management team, and they were going to start first thing in the morning, but the fire had already run to the base of the Black Range in the Aldo Leopold Wilderness. And then essentially at that point, it takes a while for everybody to get in place, but that fire was gone. We were trying to implement closure orders to keep the public out of harm's way, and by the time we would draw lines on a map as to where we wanted to keep the closure area, the fire was passed. I couldn't even tell you now, but it was tens of thousands of acres by the third day.
As the Black Fire continues to grow, weather conditions and dry fuel is pushing the second largest fire still burning in the state. The Black Fire is now sitting at 235,000 acres and is only 26% contained. There are 756 personnel working to put out the flames. According to fire officials, the flames were human-caused, but the exact cause is still being investigated by law enforcement.
The Black Fire west of TRC is now 50% contained. That fire has burned more than 282,000 acres.
So a lot of times, I think media wants to grab on to the bad story, because that type of news just seems to sell better, I guess. And good news is sometimes maybe a little more boring. And then I think sometimes maybe we're always trying to paint that everything about fire is good. And I don't necessarily think that that's the best either. I think the best approach is to try and get people to understand that fire is a very dynamic thing. Fire moves across the landscape. There are certain aspects that we can absolutely control. There's certain aspects of fire that we can't. We've got some really good modeling technology now that gives us a really good idea of how that fire is going to want to move across the landscape, given the current fuels conditions. With a lot of suppression and other land management techniques that have been used over the years for various reasons, our fuels have gotten outside of a natural level. Fire hasn't been allowed to completely play its natural role. And part of that is because, you know, people have been introduced to the landscape. You have towns, you have subdivisions, you have houses. You need to stop the fire to protect. You might have grazing allotments you're going to keep from burning up the grass, or fence infrastructure. So when you start adding a bunch of stuff to the landscape and fire's not able to play its natural role, I think we find to prevent fire from getting those higher severities and impacting some of those resources.
We want to minimize the impacts to the watersheds, to the fish, to the owls, and reduce that severity, because it's pretty critical. I mean, these are species that are listed in the Endangered Species Act, and we just can't afford to lose that many.
Now we're trying to use techniques to maybe mimic fire. That might be thinning, that might be prescribed fire, that might be removing some of those fuels and material. We're trying to get to a place where we can allow fire to play its natural role again.
Ultimately, the black fire burned 325,000 acres, and I believe it's 7 to 10% of that was high severity. So when people get a vision of a forest fire, they're thinking black sticks, everything gone. And then there was a good portion, maybe 20% or so, that was moderate severity. You still have black trees, but there's still leaves on the trees. Those leaves will provide some kind of ground cover, and they typically recover a little bit faster. For all intents and purposes, a month ago, we're fighting fire. And now, we've got probably 6 fires burning in the wilderness that all we do is monitor and hope that they get bigger. We tend to think of things just on our terms in our lifetime. You know, it's what we see out the window of our car that is our reality. Even for me, I'm in my mid-50s, where I might say, oh, it's always been like that, as long as I can remember. Big deal. 50 years is nothing when you talk about a forest. When you think about these systems and you may see some high severity fire, it's going to set those places back and on a different trajectory. So with climate change and other factors, it may never be that same forest that it was for my lifetime. But on the Gila, what we're trying to do is allow that fire to play its natural role, especially in the wilderness. We're not going out there and putting out every fire because we don't need to.
So this is an example where I can draw a perimeter, I can measure acres. This was trying to plan out an area of a remote fire we had that we were going to use a trail system to contain that fire, but it ended up getting rained out at about 10 acres.
A fire on the Gila can get 100,000 acres and never impact a single person or infrastructure. It does have a big impact on our trail system, but it's not really going to burn down a house. And there's not many places where you can do that outside of wilderness. And that's one of the beauties about the Gila and the wilderness, is that we do have those systems and they are playing their natural role, and fire's playing its natural role.